And I love how we have so many people from all around the world. This is so neat looking at this map. That said, I wanted to give a warm welcome to Divya. Thank you so much for being here with us, Divya. Let me read your bio real quick. Divya Kala. She oversees the PR, comms, and marketing activities over at Dhruva Space in India. She previously worked as a journalist and national technology features editor at The Hindu, one of India's largest and oldest English daily newspapers. Divya Kala is the co-chair of the Elevating Women Committee at SSPI WISE, and she's been very integrated and involved with Women's Aerospace Network since our start. So I'm especially happy and so happy to have you here, Divya. We are going to open it up for Divya to take the stage. And so I'm going to start. What we're doing is a guest spotlight. So Divya is going to talk for about 15 minutes, and then we're going to do a live raffle. We're going to pull some of the raffle tickets. I got some fun stuff for you here, and then we're going to open it up to some questions. So Divya, I will let you take it off.
Thank you so much, Holly. And hi, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day. And congratulations to the Women's Aerospace Network for their first episode of the Voices in Aerospace series. And I'm so honored that I get to be featured at all, let alone the first person to speak. I'm based in Hyderabad in India. And yeah, I guess if you told me 5 years ago that you're going to be working in the space industry, I would have absolutely said you're crazy. There's no way. Given my absolute lack of aptitude with anything space related, there's no way I would have been able to do that. So I think when I look at PR comms and marketing and then how I linked it into what I do in the space industry here, it's interesting because everyone just loves the world of space storytelling. And I think talking about space, whether you're from that background or not, everyone can find some kind of commonality that they maybe didn't realize they had before. Yeah, a little bit about myself. I grew up in Botswana in Southern Africa. And I think I always was very curious. I think my report card always said, God, the person talks too much in class and stuff. But hey, I think it was more of an enabler for me later in life rather than an inhibitor. Don't let the report card stop you guys. That's, I think, one advice I would give to anyone. I think it was the early 90s when I was growing up in Botswana, and it was very much on the heels of, there were some lingering effects of the post-apartheid systemic racism, very much still present. While challenging, this environment actually really shaped my perspective in profound ways. I, along with my other Indian friends, other students of color, we all faced a lot of issues in what was a predominantly white colonized country up until liberation. Yeah, there were some problems that were still pretty evident, and it really shaped my perspective in really profound ways. I really became very aware of how history, privilege, and bias influence a lot of people's opportunities and interactions. Rather than letting these experiences discourage me, they empowered me to cultivate a deeper sensitivity to people's backgrounds and lived realities. So that's what set me into wanting to become a journalist and tell people stories, understand their challenges, bring these challenges to light. So coming where to space industry, global collaboration is essential, right? So I've learned to apply this awareness to ensure inclusivity, respect, cultural understanding, and no one's a really perfect communicator. Everyone gets it wrong at some point or at several points in life. I think when you're looking at marketing and PR and journalism, the key thing is empathy and understanding or learn empathy that when you're communicating with anybody. Navigating complex narratives, so right now, whether it's in business or diplomacy, all of these require empathy and a nuanced approach. So these are skills that, recognize and help bridge gaps and that have been valuable in shaping a brand. And it resonates across different audiences and obviously helps me engage on a much more larger scale. which is why I'm really active in SSPIYs and Women's Aerospace Network. I'm really lucky I get to meet other women who I continue to learn from, and I really get to aspire to as well. I think we meet different role models in our lives, and I've been meeting some incredible people along the way. So after my school in Botswana, I did my journalism in the UK, my bachelor's degree, and then I did my media governance in the London School of Economics as well. Then I proceeded to come back to Brexit hit, and there was a growing kind of fear there. There was a growing sense of xenophobia there as well, and there was obviously a lot of issues around visas and everything. Things started aligning where when I came to India for the first time about 8 or 9 years ago, I was offered an editorial position at The Hindu, which is one of the more prestigious newspapers, where I think I was, again, really lucky, where I got to explore a lot of interesting kind of topics, be it deep tech, film, which I love, and a lot of things to do with startups and what the cultural landscape of India was, which is obviously very diverse and fragmented. There's a saying, right? Every 100 kilometers you go in India, the custom changes, the food changes, the traditions change, the language change, the clothes change, a lot change. So I got to experience that being a journalist. Yeah, culture shock was like an immersion therapy of sorts where I really got to meet a lot of interesting people. Of course, when you're writing on tech, you start meandering a little bit towards space. And I started seeing that in India, there was a growing private sector. There was no support for a private sector in India during the mid 2010s. And it was around 2022 when I decided to move out and join Dhruva Space, which is actually India's first private space tech startup. The person who had invited me, the CEO, he actually called up and was like, hey, we're kicking off branding and PR, and this is something that I really think we could work on a really great scale, and it's all about defining the narrative as well. What I realized from those interactions was there was so much potential in the space sector. There were all of these engineers who I met through stories that I'd done that were building space companies, and there was no necessarily like a regulatory framework or not much of an investment landscape. I felt like it was really important to help tell that story because there were so many of these incredible, not just dreamers, but doers in India who were really taking a lot of great steps to realize space technology for being made in India. And of course, like India is known as one of the strongest IT hubs or deep tech hubs in the world. And here in Hyderabad, we have the biggest incubator as well. That was where my current company was incubated in its early days too. By the time I joined, there were 20 people, and that was in March 2020. Just to give you a scale of how the space sector has grown in terms of talent, 20 people back in 2022, March. Now it's Feb of 2025, and we're 167 people. And it's really emblematic of how we were tapping into all of these really passionate talent pools. And when I joined, it was a really big leap of faith. It was not like I knew orbital mechanics or what made a satellite be a satellite or what was a ground station. I didn't know any of that. It was a really big leap of faith. But something in my gut told me, you have to do this. You're going to regret it if you don't do it. You're going to always wonder what if. So I jumped in feast first, and I don't think I've really looked back since, primarily because the other 19 people in the company at the time really took time out of their day to teach me all of these things about orbital mechanics. What makes a satellite? What are the spacecraft design principles? It is really a testament to them who they were already helping build a startup from the ground up, but they took time out of it. They could have just been like, hey, here's a book, like study, or here's something on Udemy or, edXL. But they really showed me in what is probably the biggest learning curve of my life. And I really owe it to them. So I think, whether it was someone in avionics, someone who was really into mechanical, someone into regulatory, someone into business, I was essentially a human sponge and it's because of them that I'm able to do my job today. So I'm always so thankful to them. It's really humbling, I must say. And it's not easy to do a job switch where you were very comfortable. It's scary. It's really scary. But I think what I've been taught is sometimes the things that scare you the most are probably the most worthwhile. And I really enjoyed that. Yeah, and of course there were challenges. There were times where I was like, I just don't get it, because I was the person that got like a straight up like D plus in at most in like physics. It was bad, and I'm able to look at it in all of this in a very different perspective for what I do for the company. Whether it's like talking about like mission milestones, how our products are talked about, how, and again, it's because of them, and also because of the team that I've continued to help build. And I think I always have, as I continue to build my team, I always believe in hiring people who are smarter than you. Always do that. Always be on your toes. Always hire people who are smarter than you. Always surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. I think there's a saying, the quality of your life is equal to the quality of your relationships. And I try to make the most of that through what I do at Dhruva. And I think there are definitely a lot of challenges, be it the dilemma between what is equality versus equity. That's something that I think a lot of people aren't aware of generally across the ecosystem through my work with especially SSPIYs. But I've also come to know the value of an allyship program. So while it's really important to be a strong woman in aerospace, I really think that having that support system around you of people who are very cognizant of the challenges you might face as a woman in the field, as a maybe a non-technical woman in a technical field as well. You're also working in an ecosystem where there are certain approaches to how things are done. You're either working with people who are very goal-oriented, or you're working with people who are process-oriented. And of course, in a startup, I was talking to a colleague the other day who was asking me, oh, how long has it been since you've joined? And I said, well, it's 3 years in startup years, but it's 10 years if you're at an MNC. Because when you join a startup, you are doing everything, because that's just the nature of how it is. And anyone in the audience listening now, if you've worked in a startup, I think you'd probably understand it could be anything from screwing in a conference door properly to answering phones to trying to figure out spreadsheets. You're in a lot of existential crises at that point, but it's so worth it. And I think it makes your skin really thick. It makes you enjoy the process a lot more. I was always very goal-oriented. I now I feel like I'm a little bit of both. Let's see. But I'm let's see what the next 10 years hold as well. That's me in a nutshell for now. That's how things have been up until this point.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Divya. And I found so many of the things you're saying very relatable, especially the last part about a startup. That's pretty funny. In the conference door. But what I really love about your journey is the different continents that you've lived on and made an impact on. That is so cool. I think 3 different continents.
Yes. So yes, you're growing up in a place where for the first 20 years of your life where you know almost everyone in town. And then you go to London where you feel like an ant. And you're also like, oh, international student struggles, like how do I make extra money and stuff. And then you're moving to like where your parents grew up, but you necessarily didn't grow up. It was 2 very different culture shocks, but very much formative, very formative.
I can't imagine. The other thing that really stood out to me was you talking about how other people took the time to invest in you and explain orbital mechanics 101. And that's awesome, because I'm so thankful for the people who have been kind to help and help me understand. And then there's also the opposite spectrum. It's like when I was in college and I was trying to build a cube satellite, right? We had no idea how to do it. We weren't aerospace students. We had no advisory board or anything. And so I was sitting there like reading these 500-pound books, right? I actually emailed one of the writers of the book because I'm like, dude, this is insane. I love it. I'm your biggest fan. Thank you for putting this stuff out there. But I have a question. I'm just trying to understand. Can I please take 1 minute of your time or ask you a question? And he was like, oh, that's why I wrote the book. Sorry. And I'm like, oh, man, I get it. But at the same time, it just reinforces the gratitude that I have for those people and people like you, Divya, who are taking the time to speak with us today. to go on a whole different note, a raffle time. So if you didn't check in and get your raffle number, it's not too late. I just put a link in the chat and you can go to that form and get a raffle number. In the meantime, let's start with a couple questions. I know that we have some in the queue, but I want to start with those cute little cards, Tina, if you wouldn't mind pulling that up. Okay. What extracurriculars helped you get into a good college, and what classes would you recommend for someone interested in the field?
That's an interesting question, because the kind of school that I went to, we had a very mandatory extracurricular structure. So we had to do one community service, one enrichment activity, which was like drama, theater type of thing. And it also had to be something physical. So you had to do sports. I think having that kind of structure, even if it's not a mandated structure in your school, having that combination really helps you not just get into what one would deem a good college, but help you find what you're really looking to do. Because I think what I've realized is nowadays, yes, there are some colleges that have really good merit and value and perception. And of course, you do have your colleges that have certain tie-ups with places that do placement drives and stuff. But I've realized that they really want to see you be this really well-shaped person that would walk away from that college to be like, hey, this person graduated from here, be it, I'm just going to say my college, which was the University of the Arts London. They were, not that they talk about, but they said, okay, this person graduated and they're doing XYZ and so on. So I think when it's really how you integrate yourself into your extracurriculars, I would advise giving your community service, you do an enrichment, where you're actually figuring out what you like, what you don't like, what kind of ticks you off or whatever. And then a physical just to blow off steam, because college is really stressful. High school is really stressful. And of course, community service, because it goes without saying. I think classes, I really appreciated anything like research related. So especially where I am now, I do a lot of writing and I do a lot of research that would help drive a lot of the PR and the marketing and what we do. So understanding how research is done and why research is done, more the how and the why rather than where you're going to look and what you're looking for. So I think make sure that you go something like in terms of like research methodologies, that's how it's done, because in comms you're going to be doing that, in marketing you're going to be doing that a lot, especially when you are the one who's probably going to be answering a lot of your own questions in your head. So yeah, I think that's like the first kind of class I would recommend. The second kind of class I would recommend is something that is not having anything to do with your core discipline. In my master's, I took up a legal course where it was more regulating news gathering, which ends up being probably the most used module today in terms of what I do, because I'm able to understand media relationships a lot more and understanding what is within my brand's legal rights and what is within a journalist's legal rights as well. So understanding, I think getting some kind of a legal kind of look into the ecosystem you're about to dive into is always worth it. I think even if it's a surface level, or even if it's like a quick crash course, or if it's like a proper like year-long thing, I would recommend it. Be as much well-rounded if you can, if that's what you really want to do, and make sure it fits in. So there's this thing called a big fat hairy idea, and it's like, could be anything. Like, for example, I want to go to space. I want to go zero gravity for some time, but here are kind of like the little things that would help me along the way. And why not dive into them? Life is short, so I wanted to look at it from that point of view as well. So yeah.
I love that. So number one is learning about research and like how to research, and then also just doing something that's completely left field, because you never know how it'll tie in. My job over at NASA headquarters, right? I'm supposed to be a systems engineer, but every day I'm having all these conversations with legal teams, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know, but I'm learning fast, and I wish I had taken a course or something. So you never know what all the skills that you'll need to pull out of a basket, right?
Yeah, it's like rabbit out of a hat.
And then we actually got a lot of questions. People found it really cool how you transitioned from journalism into the space industry. So any advice that you have for people in that aspect, because a lot of our audience, they want to be in the aerospace industry, but they don't want to be engineers or anything like that, or in STEM, and they love communications and writing. So any tips on that?
So I think you might not even want to be, for example, a blogger or a newspaper journalist or a magazine journalist. You could probably be an independent content creator where you're genuinely just like making little videos about space, but meaningful ones. Because I think the one of the key kind of natural traits when you are a journalist is you're not just like writing these stories that have been commissioned to you, you're also writing these stories that really interest you. And readers and your editor, there can always be a disconnect that they can sense when you are not interested in what you are writing. You really have to love what you're writing about. I started actually writing about space, especially the Indian space ecosystem, or even commissioning stories to journalists I was working with to have them write stories about space ecosystem, be it Indian or the rest of the world. I think dive into that as a journalist first and look at opportunities where, hey, maybe I could work in policy advocacy, maybe I could be a comms person, maybe I could really head up product marketing, or maybe I could head up a space magazine. Maybe I could run space events. If like I could be your go-to for space merch if I did like fashion design, for example. Because for example, I also did a little bit of fashion journalism at my company. We also have a merch brand as well. So I think dive into what you love because it's going to reflect in the outcome, and it's your career, right? You really want to make sure that you're going to fail fast at some points, and it's better to fail fast, but I think focus on what you're really interested in terms of the space industry. Write those stories and just put them out into the universe, no pun intended, and just go for it. If you want to start a space magazine, just go for it. If you want to start a space match, go for it. Yeah.
Was a perfect segue. We have here the Women's Aerospace magazine. We have the second edition that is launching soon. That's coming out in March. So if you want to get on the wait list, drop your email in the chat. We are going to have a special newsletter where you can get some access to some things early for it. We'll give out some more giveaways and things like that. So stay tuned. Drop your email in the chat if you want to join the list for the second edition. So excited. Okay, so back to the raffle. All right, I am looking here. Actually, Tina, would you mind taking down those little cards, please? You have a chance. Okay, so I'm looking at a list of 53 people who checked in, who signed up, got a raffle number. If you don't remember your number, that's totally fine. I have it all here. This is perfect for Black History Month. We have a Women's Aerospace sticker here, a couple more stickers, some cards, and I actually have some NASA merch that I'll send out too. Okay, so I'm gonna draw 3 people randomly, 3 numbers. Let me load it on my screen here. Number 1, we have Lydia Scrivens, 5637. Lydia, are you here? Lydia's here. Awesome. We have Ayushi Malik, 6235. Are you here, Ayushi? Ah, they're here. Yay. And last one is Shamini I'm so sorry if I'm butchering your name. I'm so sorry. Navel, 1955. Are you here at all, Shamini? Yay! Oh, they're here too. Okay, that was so exciting. That was our very first ever Women's Aerospace raffle. So thank you for participating. Okay, one last section. Let's go to answering the rest of your questions that are in the queue. So I see 2 people here said that they have questions in the queue. So once again, the queue is 1, 2, 3, 4. Is the 5th button down, and then it's the 2nd button that I have a question mark. So it'll pop you in that queue. So we'll get to you. All right, so first person, I'm going to click hand the mic, and there will be a little banner that pops up on your screen, and it says you have the stage or something like that. So feel free to unmute yourself, Hannah, and ask your question, please.
Hi, Divya. Thank you so much for your amazing talk. It was like really inspiring, especially to someone like me who's also of Indian descent. So thank you for taking the time to do all that. My question was, you talked a little bit about jumping into a new career based on gut feeling. What other things do you do when you are making a life-changing decision like that?
Wow. Okay. That's a good question. I think um, so this was probably the biggest life-changing decision I made, right? I think when you get really comfortable, you actually start noticing things about yourself that, okay, why am I stagnating? I think that was where I started. That's the first thing I started doing was I started questioning, am I doing it because I love it? Am I doing it because I'm comfortable? And do I want to stay comfortable or do I want to stay challenged? And I think I'm very big on pushing myself out of my comfort zone every once in a while. So my CEO had actually called me 4 months before I actually took up the position because I really wanted to weigh up if this was something that I could do, if this was something I wanted to do, and if it's something that I should do. I actually, and this was like right on the heels of COVID as well. It was like right at the end of the third wave, so the world was in a very uncertain stage. I think the last time I made a life changing decision was probably when I moved back to India or moved to India, right? And it was sometimes there are curveballs that life throw your way that you can't really accept, and you just have to get with it. Otherwise, it's almost like a do or die situation, and natural selection can take its course, especially with your career. What I ended up doing was I actually just sat in a corner and like really cried because I looked at it as a lot of defeat because it was really depressing and it was really hard to come to terms with the fact that this life changing decision, when I moved from London to India, it felt like something just hadn't gone the way I had hoped, especially after working really hard. What I've come to realize now, 8 or 9 years later, is that it's okay to sit with your feelings and be with it because that at the end of the day makes you a little bit stronger. I know I could have easily said, oh, I stepped out of my comfort zone and I went bungee jumping, or I sat in a cafe and I did people watching or something. But I think as women, there's a lot of pressure not to succumb to those things, not to succumb to all of those really self-deprecating and self-demeaning kind of feelings, but suffer a bit to thrive a lot. So I look at it that way. Maybe not directly answering your question, but that's what I did. And yeah, I think that's how I go about it. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be upset about something.
Thank you so much for your honesty. And it's such a relief to hear because a lot of people come to me, especially students, and there's a lot of imposter syndrome that people in our community deal with, a lot of uncertainty about the future. And that just comes naturally when you do take big leaps like that. And I always want to just reassure them, like, hey, you're doing okay. And it is hard. It's easy to think about it. It's hard to actually execute. For example, when I was in college, I walked into the women's bathroom during finals week. There was a girl sitting on the bathroom floor in one of the stalls. She was picking Oreos up from the floor, opening them, licking the middle, and then putting it back on the ground on the other side. I knocked on the door and are you okay? Obviously, she's not okay. She's eating Oreos off the bathroom floor. She says, are you sniffing? I'm fine. Obviously, she wasn't okay, but my heart just goes out. So I want to thank you for your honesty because I know that a lot of people here struggle and it's okay to cry. And sometimes we got to give ourselves credit that we're doing a lot of first, right? Not just first for ourselves, but a lot of people here, especially in our community, they're doing first for their generation, first for their family, first sometimes for their entire country. So these are big mountains that we are moving and shaping together. And that's why I'm so happy to be here surrounded by this community because it transforms itself by people crying alone. But if we all cry together and bring something out of it, that is how we change the industry for the next generation to create a place that doesn't just help people welcome them into aerospace, but it's how we build a status quo for people to thrive in aerospace. All of that said, are there any more questions? If not, I do have a couple more here. Okay, so what Most of the ones that we got are still about breaking into the space industry. And what challenges have you faced coming from a non-traditional background in the space industry? And what challenges do you see for India's space sector in particular?
So I'll answer the first part in terms of challenges. I think I spoke about the learning curve, which is still ongoing. And in terms of the technical subject matter and understanding not just the technical subject matter, but also from the whole ecosystem in terms of the financial implications, the regulatory implications, collaborative implications, and of course, a big one is the geopolitical implications as well. And I think in terms of challenges ahead for India's space sector, I don't know if any of you know this, but there was a launch. So there was a time where India was not really known as a space nation, and this was back before 2017. So in 2017, the PSLV rocket launched 104 nano satellites, and the record before that was 74 satellites from the Soyuz rocket. I think in terms of like when that launch happened, when 104 nano satellites were launched from that single rocket, right? The previous record being 74. India was on its way to being a space nation. And I think in terms of the ecosystem's reputation of being a frequent launch destination, a cost-effective launch destination, and the PSLV rocket itself being like known as the workhorse of ISRO, which is just saying that it's one of the most reliable launch vehicles in the world. India had been really great at building this rapport with the global space ecosystem, because I think to this day, there are a lot of other space agencies that continue to lean into the Indian space ecosystem. So in terms of challenges, I think, yes, it's a very competitive landscape, but India is known for being very creative and innovative. A few of my colleagues were telling me that when they were studying in their masters in Amsterdam and in France, they were actually told that, you know what, like whenever we have Indian students coming in, we see the most innovative and creative ideas as well. And we've been coming to have that reputation in the global market. So I think there's a regulatory framework, coming into play. There's a lot more private sector progress ahead as well. The private sector is very nascent, but the support of the government as well in recent years has been really fantastic. And it's the reason why my company was able to do 4 launches in a span of 24 months. And of course, that's also a testament to the creative and innovative people I work with as well, the same people who taught me. Yeah, I think in terms of challenges, I look at them as opportunities to rise up to global challenges as well.
Actually, Tina, I'm going to hand it over to you, and I'm going to let you take care of the questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course, I got you. All right. Thank you so much for answering that question, Divya. I am thrilled and excited to hear about all these launches in the private sector in India. And I think a lot of people actually have questions about that too. I'm going to go right to the queue. Christina Cannon, she was in the queue. She has a question. So Christina, I'm going to hand over the mic to you now if you want to ask your question.
Awesome. Thanks, Tina. Hi. Wondering if you see any kind of big picture stories that you believe need to be told in the space world that aren't being told yet.
Oh, yeah. Are you a space storyteller as well?
Yes, trying to be. Yes.
Oh, great. I think it's like the stories of so we call tier 2 and tier 3 cities in India are doing in terms of space innovation as well. There are a lot of incredible other startups in this private sector that are also working with NGOs like nonprofits to bring up students into the space sector as well and help them launch satellites. One of them is Space Kids, Srimati, who is, I think, also active on Women's Aerospace Network. She's doing amazing work, and she's definitely someone whose energy I think everyone should emulate. Another incredible story is just the one of resilience. I think when you are told no for the longest time, you only will probably either A, give up, or B, forge ahead a lot stronger. And I think that's something I've learned from this ecosystem versus reporting on startups in. There's also the story of what is the secret to building at such a cost effective means. One of the biggest stories in India that isn't told is one of the supply chain here. The reason that, for example, my office is in the area that it is because we are 5 minutes away from our suppliers. And these are people who their office is probably like a 5 by 10 kind of setup, but you would not know them, what they do if you walked past them on the street, like in terms of the shop itself. But when you walk in, you will actually see an entire wall of certificates from the Indian Space Agency, and all of these have collaborated for years. And when I say years, I'm talking about 40 to 50 years to the Indian space program. They have contributed to the successful Mars orbiter mission. They have contributed to the upcoming human spaceflight mission coming from India. They're working on the space station program. They've worked on the Chandrayaan-3 mission, which made India the first nation to land on the south pole of the moon, of the lunar surface. And these are people who don't want to build a whole satellite, but they know what is space grade. And we are very lucky to, I think there are a few people in the audience who would also know of these, who are in the private sector space in India as well. Some of you would also know, having worked with a lot of these people, who they are. And there are around 1,500 of these vendors across India. We've literally placed our company to be 5 minutes away from them, because that just impacts your mission lead times in such a positive way. And that collaboration with the vendors is really important. Your supply chain is everything, and it helps you in terms of your space heritage. It helps you in terms of your business development and your marketing. And it helps you just in terms of how your brand is also built as well. The first time I went to meet them was in August of 2023, when one of our advisors, who is the outgoing CEO of Space, he had joined us as a strategic advisor, and he had come for a week, and he wanted to actually see our supply chain as well. So we went on a drive, and I showed him all of these places. And these are people, again, who the kind of orders that they're pulling are mind-blowing. And they have a very clear vision of what they want to do, how they want to do it, the kind of relationships they have. The supply chain is something I think a lot of people don't really report on, and I think it needs to be reported on. I think it needs to be told, and I think those stories need to be told.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that. So we have time for only one more question. This is by Gemini again. I'm going to give you the mic. You can feel free to ask your question.
Thank you. Thank you very much for talking. It's all really interesting. My question is, with your previous answers, you're talking about the human stories and the people you're working with. From kind of PR and comms, how do you balance the human stories and the people behind the supply chain, and also the technical innovation that you're working on? And does that differ when you're talking to other space related companies versus non-space companies, where you have to really sell the sector to someone that's not familiar with the sector already?
I think I understand where you're coming from with that question. The first 6 months of me being in the space industry, that was like and it's still something I think I tackle every day, because it's very, very case to case. You have like your brand marketing, and then you have your product marketing, and then you have what you're doing to support the overall brand vision of the company. What I've realized here, especially here in India, a lot of the resonance comes with a combination of everything, because when you reach your technical milestones, you're building potential customer confidence as well. When you are reaching, for example, it could be a brand milestone in terms of winning an award, winning a government issued award for the kind of work that you've done as well in the ecosystem. I think it's always tough to balance it out. There's no hard and fast formula for that. There are times where I've noticed I'm going a little bit too heavy on the brand side of things. We need to up the technical product marketing. How that kind of problem ends up starting to solve itself is working with marketers or PR comms folks who do a little bit of everything. So get a technical writer, get someone who's into straight up product marketing, work with different product managers, really stay honed in on what kind of marketing are you doing? Are you doing reactive marketing where you see something happening in the ecosystem and you're like, hey, I think that's something that I think we can respond to. For example, here in India, we've had one of the biggest kind of sacred gatherings. It's called Mahakumbh Mela. It happens every 144 years. And there are a lot of imagery companies that have taken different high resolution images of the area to show how space products can actually help with decision making in situations where there's high crowds, when you want to keep everyone safe, and of course to also showcase the significance of something that happens like pretty much literally once in a lifetime, or even once every 2 lifetimes for a lot of people. Whether you're being proactive on marketing, be it you really want to upsell something. If you're doing, for example, we're currently running an IOD, IOV kind of initiative where someone can hop on our nanosat for a hosted payload mission as well. So and of course that's also there when the trade show circuit kicks off, be it your satellite, be it your IAC, be it something in India like your Bangalore Space Expo, or more defense-oriented events like Def Expo and so on. So it is tough to figure out a formula and a balance for how that works out. But I found that growing my team really helps a lot because they're also able to bring in a fresh perspective into how the brand is shaped as well. Because you have to build customer confidence, you have to build brand awareness, and you also have to build excitement, right? Like space is supposed to be exciting, and space is for everyone. It's not just for the engineers, it's not just for the journalists, it's not just for your potential customers, it's for everyone. It's for someone who wants to be an engineer as well. I think making sure it's like really you have your goals in mind always, and making sure you're meeting those goals, and it's something even as simple as like having KPIs that also helps you navigate the balance as well. It's a very like boring answer, but it helps me understand where I need to recalibrate what I need to do, and it also helps me hold myself accountable and in terms of how the messaging is done as well.
Well, thank you very much. I'm really interested in this. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Divya. That was so awesome. Next, we're going to move on to a rapid fire kind of question. There's just a few questions that I want to ask so the audience can get to know you a little bit better. So, first question, what's the latest skill or hobby that you've picked up?
Cooking.
Okay. What's your go-to snack during a busy workday?
Oh no, I think there's some colleagues in the comment section. They're gonna Cadbury Crackle. It's bad.
Is that the chocolate bar?
It's a chocolate. It's not. Sorry, yeah, it's chocolate, not crack. It's chocolate.
Oh yeah.
I'm known to eat 6 at a time.
Yeah, I do love that too. So, what's your favorite book? Is the last question.
Charlotte's Web.
Oh, that's a cute one. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So I'm going to hand it off to Holly for some closing remarks at this point.
Thank you so much, Divya, and everyone for being here. Our next event is going to be February 18th. It's going to be another networking event, and we're going to try it here on Butter. So it'll be a little bit different than last time. We're going to try groups of 3 and groups of 2. We got a lot of feedback last time that people wanted to network a little bit more in groups of 3. So we're going to try that and try it more of a guided mesh up. So I'm excited for that. Let me drop the link right here if you want to go register for the networking event, and then also drop your email right now really quick if you want to get on that list for exclusive stuff for the next edition of Women's Aerospace. Oh my gosh. Yeah, so thank you so much for being here, everyone. I hope you have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.